Exodus chapter 22, verses 25 through 27. We want to read that and then we'll look at verse 25 today. The scripture reads, "If you lend money to my people, to the poor person among you, you must not be like a moneylender to him. You must not charge him interest." Your Bible might say usury. Verse 26, "If you ever take your neighbor's cloak as collateral, return it to him before sunset." 27, "For it is his only covering. It is the clothing for his body. What will he sleep in? And if he cries out to me, I will listen, because I am compassionate." May Yahweh bless His word to our hearts today. We are back in the book of the law in Exodus, particularly today. I took a break. We did 9 sermons talking about what the phrase Son of Elohim means. I did 8 sermons talking about the Shema. Brother TJ's been in the book of Acts. If you remember the last time we were here in Exodus in the book of the law, we talked about the widows and the orphans. Anybody remember that sermon? Might want to go back and listen to that. That's one of the biggest commandments in the Bible, is to remember the widows and the orphans. As always, the lessons are on the website, on our YouTube channel. You can go back and re-listen, study, take more notes, get better and better acquainted with the book of the law. That is not supposed to depart from your mouth, but you're supposed to meditate, Haggah, think upon it day and night. So you want to rehearse these lessons in your life. Today, we're going to look at verse 25. Verse 25 in Exodus 22 is where we left off, and it speaks here of lending money to the poor person among us. So this is not speaking particularly to giving money away. That is okay to do. It's fine. If you want to bless somebody and give them something to help them materially, whether it be money, food, or what have you, your time, you can give somebody something free and clear. This text today, though, is speaking of a loan that is going to be paid back over time. So it is okay also not just to give your poor neighbor something free and clear. It is okay to loan your poor neighbor something. We might think at the beginning that loaning money to a poor person or a person in need is not gracious. That thought's crossed my mind before. Why not just give it to them? But this law in Exodus 22 verse 25 shows that it is gracious. It is okay for the giver to want to be repaid, even if over a long period of time. It is not stingy. It's not being unreasonable. The Torah, Yahweh's teachings and instructions, allows for loans to the poor. When you think about it, meditate on it, the poor man in the community of Israel retains an amount of dignity in being required to pay back the loan over time. Meditate on that. He retains that dignity. I had to borrow, yes, but I repay back over time. And the money is there again. When he pays back the loan, the money is there again for the next loan to someone in the Torah community. So it's recycled charity. Each time it's paid back, it's there again for the next loan. If you set aside, let's say, just $10 or $20 a week for this purpose, you'll have a good chunk of money available in no time. $10 a week in 6 months is $240. $20 a week would be $480. You could do the math if you give more than that or put aside more than that. Someone in our community that falls on hard times here in our congregation or assembly will appreciate that money when it comes time for their gift or their interest-free loan. What is not allowed, though, is the charging of interest or usury on such loans. Look at the last part of verse 25 again. You must not be like a moneylender to him. You must not charge him interest. That word moneylender there is a creditor. It's used about 12 times in the Hebrew Bible. It's the Hebrew word nashah. Most commentators, both Jewish and Christian, will say that it actually goes back to a word that means to bite, meaning that you're taking a bite out of your poor brother. He's in need, and you're really treating him harshly if you charge him usury or interest. Some translations render this Hebrew word as extortioner. Psalm 109, verse 11, King James Version. Let the extortioner catch all that he hath, and let the strangers spoil his labor. Now, if you read this in context, King David is praying a prayer against the enemies of Yahweh, and he's saying, let somebody else take his position, and let this creditor or this extortioner, this usurer, this moneylender, let him really get him for everything. The point here is that the moneylender could be referred to as somebody that did extortion, which basically means somebody who obtains money by force or by threat. 2 Kings 4 verse 1 speaks of such a man when it says, "One of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, 'Your servant, my husband, has died. You know that your servant feared Yahweh. Now the creditor, Nashah, the moneylender, the extortioner, is coming to take my 2 children as his slaves.'" Now, praise Yahweh, he worked it out for this woman through prophet Elisha. But it's a cold-hearted man who takes a woman's children for slaves after her husband has abruptly died. What a cold-hearted extortioner. After Elisha performs the miracle of the oil, you can read about it there in 2 Kings 4, he tells her to sell the oil that miraculously came into her containers and go ahead and pay off her debt. And that's because paying off a debt is a righteous thing to do. Psalm 37 verse 21 says, "The wicked borrows and does not repay." But this woman was in a hard time that was outside of her control. A good, righteous, Torah-observant moneylender would have just told her, just keep it or pay what you can when you can. As long as something is paid, pay what you can when you can. He would have had pity, compassion, or mercy upon this woman if he was Torah-observant. I've recently been rewatching Little House on the Prairie. It's one of my favorite series on the TV. And the other night, Charles Ingalls was said to have come into this large inheritance that he received from an uncle he didn't really know. And it was going to be so many thousands of dollars, which in the late 1800s, that's a lot of money. So Mrs. Olsen, those of you that know the show know she's just a wicked lady, right? She has her good points sometimes, but man, sometimes, I just want to raise my fist to her. Oh, Mrs. Olsen, she can be a hard case. But when she found out that the Ingalls were coming into the money, she all of a sudden became friends with Caroline, as she calls her, Carolyn Olsen. And she just wanted to love on Carolyn and Charles, and she practically forced them into buying things from her mercantile on credit. She says, "It'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Me and Mr. Olsen, we'll take care of you." But then, come to find out, the money that he inherited was Confederate money, so it wasn't any good. And Mrs. Olsen turned on him. And even though she had forced him to buy all that stuff, she put a lien out on his farm. He was going to lose his farm. And he was there in tears. He said, "That's my farm, Harriet." And she said, "Oh, it's business, it's business." She turned. And thankfully the people in the town, when they had the auction for his farm, they would bid 1 cent or 2 cents on his things and then give them back to him. It is sad that things like that actually happen in the real world because people are cruel. So it's not just on a TV show. It actually is a reality in some cases. Let's look at a couple other parallel texts for this law in the Torah. We'll go first to Leviticus 25, verses 35 through 38. Verse 35, "If your brother becomes destitute and cannot sustain himself among you, you are to support him as a foreigner or temporary resident so that he can continue to live among you." How many know things happen? Anytime you have a community, congregation, or assembly, things happen and people fall on hard times. Some of you here today were here when Brother Dennis Hudson and his family attended here. May Brother Dennis rest in peace. He's no longer with us anymore. But he broke both of his legs in a freak accident on his lawnmower. And what would you want the community here to do if you broke both of your legs? Think about that. What would you do? I don't know what I would do. I would hope people would step in and take care of me. And that's exactly what we did for Brother Dennis. We had several people in here support Brother Dennis and his family through that time. And I remember when he got better, he was sitting in here, and I don't think he wanted to cry, but I don't think he could help it. He started to tear up, and he said he believed that he had found a true assembly of Yahweh, finally, one that he'd been searching for his whole life. That is a testimony to the Creator's gracious hand upon us here. Doesn't mean we're anything special or anything like that. I'm not trying to brag or anything. But we saw that brother in need, and he became poor. He wasn't poor to start with, but he fell on hard times because he lost both of his legs, and he needed about 6 months of help, and we helped him. Praise Yahweh. Verse 36, do not profit or take interest from him, but fear your mighty one, and let your brother live among you. You are not to lend him your silver with interest or sell him your food for profit. I am Yahweh your mighty one who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your mighty one. Now, verse 38 there is key because Yahweh is calling Israel of old, not just Israel of new today, but Israel of old to remember where they came from as a whole. I want you to think about this. Yahweh, by His strong right hand, brought the Israelites out of harsh slavery and bondage. They were somewhere they did not want to be. They were building these treasure cities for the pharaohs in Egypt. And He brought them out and He gave them a land. He says in Deuteronomy, I'm going to give you a land that you didn't work for. I'm going to give you wells that you didn't dig, vineyards that you didn't plant, houses that you did not build. They're going to be yours. When you've eaten and are full, bless me. When you receive all these things, bless me, Yahweh says. Yahweh gave these things to the Israelites freely. So when somebody in their community fell on hard times, they were to have the same behavior that Yahweh had and give freely. This is not in my notes, but if you study Deuteronomy 15, it talks about the sabbatical year and how that nobody is supposed to be in debt scripturally over a 7-year period. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I love Yahweh's law. It's perfect. Psalm 19 verse 7. That would be great if we had our debts released every 7 years. Well, it says that if your poor brother approaches you and the 6th year in the Shemitah cycle is about to come to a close, He says, don't turn your eye from the poor brother because you know the sabbatical year is about to be there and he wants a loan and you think, well, if I loan him, he may not be able to pay me back because the sabbatical year is coming. Yahweh says, don't you close your eye or be tight-fisted, the Hebrew says. Don't be tight-fisted towards your poor brother. Give to him freely. Why? Because Yahweh gave to you freely. Houses you didn't build, wells you didn't dig, vineyards you didn't plant. So be like Yahweh. Be like Yahweh. Don't seek a profit or a surplus or interest from your poor brother or sister. The next parallel text to this law is in Deuteronomy 23, 19 through 20. It says, do not charge your brother interest on money, food, or anything that can earn interest. You may charge a foreigner. The Hebrew word there is nakri, means like a temporary person that resides in Israel, probably coming through on business. Most of my commentaries on Exodus said the reason Yahweh would allow the Israelis to charge the foreigners interest is because most of the time when a nakri would come in the land, the interest that will be paid will be on like one of his business ventures. Okay, so you can think about that. I'll get into that more in a second. But you may charge a foreigner interest, but you may not charge your brother interest, so that Yahweh your mighty one may bless you in everything you do in the land you are entering to possess. Now, one thing that's different here when you compare this to the law in Exodus 22, verse 25, and Leviticus 25, 35 through 38, is that a poor brother is not specified. The poor brother is specified in Exodus and Leviticus, but he's not specified here in Deuteronomy. I do, however, think that a poor brother is implied based upon the parallel texts, first, and secondly, based upon a careful reading right here. Ask yourself, why would a brother Israelite in an agrarian community need a loan on money or food to begin with? It would be because he wasn't well off, he was poor, or in need at that particular time. It would not be, as is often the case today, that he wanted to start a business even though he was doing pretty good for himself. That wouldn't be the case. Now, I need to talk more about this here because there are some people in the Torah-observant community that think any type of profit or interest is wrong when dealing between brothers. I want to use me for an example. I'm not a poor man. I don't consider myself to be a rich man, but I live comfortably. I live comfortably. Kim laughs when I say that to him. I have a good home, plenty of food, clothing. The Bible says if you have food and clothing, you're supposed to be content. Paul wrote to Timothy and said that. But let's say that Brother Matthew wanted to start a business, but I needed 50 grand to start that business. I don't have to start the business. I'm doing just fine without it. But I wanted to increase my finances for various reasons. Let's say I wanted to leave more of an inheritance to my children or my grandchildren. Well, let's say there's another brother in here who will loan me the $50,000, but he does so requiring, Brother Matthew, that when you get the business going, I want to get back $75,000 or a percentage share in the business. Is that a sin? Some people in our communities think that it is. I do not think that it is. And it's because the situation there is entirely different. I'm not poor to begin with, and the loan that I'm receiving is going to eventually make me a big profit over time. That is not the context of the Torah portions against charging interest. Now, imagine me receiving that $50,000 loan, and in a few years, the business that I started is profiting $100,000 per year, let's say, and eventually it grows and gets bigger than that. Think about this. In my estimation, I think that I would then be taking advantage of the brother who gave me the loan by not allowing him to share in my profit that was only made possible because he gave me the $50,000 to start with. You see my point? I was not a poor brother in need of money, food, or anything, victuals, something like that. I was someone that wanted to begin a business venture, and I used my brother, who was more well off than me, to do such. One time I bought a house in Lovellville, Tennessee. It wasn't that expensive. It was in an Amish community, but I bought it from another Yahweh brother. I didn't realize that at the time. I don't think he realized it, but when he found out that I was a Yahweh brother, Torah brother, he called me and he said, "Are you a Hebrew brother, a Christian brother?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Well, I don't want to charge you interest." He said, "This is what the bank is wanting me to do." He said, "How about we just bump the price up on the house a little bit and you could pay me a higher price, but I won't be charging you interest." So basically, it was the same thing, right? I'd have paid the same to him if I paid the interest, but he just bumped the price up on the house. Now, I chuckled. I'm not mad about that at all. I don't think interest on that loan or that home purchase would have been a transgression for him to charge me. I wasn't a poor brother. I wasn't in need. This was a business proposition. I bring this up, though, to point out that bumping up the price is just the same thing as charging interest. A lot of Amish people do this in their business dealings. They'll just bump the price up. I'm not saying that's a sin. I just want to say it's the same thing there. Let's talk about Torah-approved investments when it comes to money. Ecclesiastes 11, 1 through 2, New English translation says, quote, "Send your grain overseas, for after many days you will get a return. Divide your merchandise among 7 or 8 investments, for you do not know what calamity may happen on the earth." End of quote. Proverbs 31:24 speaks of the virtuous woman making linen garments and then selling them. Selling them for what? To make money, to make a profit. Just like we all offer some kind of service to make a profit. None of us are in a business where we charge the exact same thing that it costs us because we have to make some type of a profit. The virtuous woman did such. Even Yeshua in the parable of the talents told the man who hid his talent, Matthew 25, 26 through 27, "You evil, lazy servant, you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and when I returned, I would have received my money back with interest." Some people try their best to explain that text away, but it says what it says. And these verses can be understood easily when you realize the Torah forbids charging interest to a poor brother or sister or someone in the community that has fallen on hard times or had an accident. The Torah prohibition against usury or interest is not about business ventures or investing. It is not. While I do not see anything in the Torah that forbids a person from paying interest, like in our day on a piece of property or a home, I want to say this, especially to the younger people here, and also to us older people. It is not wise to acquire massive debt to the point where you are burdened down financially. And you lay your head down at night and you're worried to death and you're stressed out, and it makes your body sick because you're wondering, how am I going to be able to afford all of this that I've acquired? It's not wise. Sometimes we see people in this beautiful mansion and fancy car and clothes and everything. We think, man, they're so rich, but in reality, they're just as stressed out as the man that makes $30,000 a year. They're in such debt that they don't know what to do. It's not wise. It's so important for us to live within whatever means Yahweh has given us. When you begin your adult life, young people, you will generally be at the lowest point financially that you'll ever be. There are exceptions, but generally that's the rule. Bettering yourself financially takes time. Now, there are a lot of get-rich-quick schemes in the world today where people will promise you so much money and it sounds good and just do this or play this. But the Bible says wealth gotten by vanity shall diminish, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase, right? Usually get-rich-quick schemes will drain your money and you'll be sad. Scratch-offs will drain your money. It's not a sin to play a scratch-off. I get one every time. Somebody says, you're the first preacher I met that gambles. I might be the first preacher you ever met. But a scratch-off will drain your money. I'm not saying it's a sin. Once again, it's like going to a ball game. If you set aside an amount of money and you want to go to the Braves game, that's may not be expedient, but it's lawful to do. It's perfectly fine. But you don't want to ever do something to the point that it takes away from your family and it burdens you down and you can no longer supply your basic needs. Slow and steady work. The fourth commandment says to rest on the seventh day, but it also says 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. Slow and steady work, saving some of your money, and, I know this seems backwards, giving some of your money away, tithing, lending, orphans, widows. These things will build your work. Slow and steady manual labor or work, whatever field Yahweh has put you in. Saving some money. My dad said, son, it ain't about how much you make, it's about how much you save. My dad always told me that. Envelope system, I still do it today. I remember when he sat me down, I was probably about 13 years old. Made $5 an hour. It worked out $200 that week. Boy, that $20 bill was hard to put in that tithe envelope. But he said, son, 10% goes to the Lord. I'm glad I had a dad that taught me that. I'm glad I had a dad that said, you need to give some to the Lord, son. I'm so thankful for my Christian dad. And then giving some of your money away. This will build your wealth over time. Always remember to live within your means. Once you start making a little more money, it doesn't mean you have to spend a little more money. It doesn't mean you have to buy the bigger house or the fancier car. Save, invest in a good, righteous company. Give to the poor. Continue to live on the same level for a while. If you're faithful in these areas, you'll eventually get to a point where you can bump yourself up to the next level on the financial status pole or what have you. There's nothing wrong with having something nice and enjoying life. Read Ecclesiastes. It says to enjoy life with your wife and your material things. But I promise you, you will be more happy if you, one, have less debt or no debt, and two, live a simple life. You'll be so happy. Proverbs 3, 9 through 10 says this, honor Yahweh with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will be bursting out with wine. We are called to be a good steward or manager of the material things Yahweh blesses us with. Always recognize everything you have is made available because the Creator has blessed you and graced you with it. Everything you have. I teach my children, when you get food and you're full, don't forget to bless Yahweh. Sometimes we're full, fat, satisfied, and we forget to bless Him. He says, don't forget to bless me. Why? Because you can do it. Don't think when you get all these things, He tells the Israelites in the land of Canaan, that it is by your hand and your power that you've acquired this wealth. Because it is I, Yahweh, that giveth you the power to become wealthy or financially stable. Don't forget to bless me. Don't forget to bless me. Making sure you do with your money what Yahweh requires of you and then thanking Him for everything, even every little bit, keeps yourself in check. A person who honors Yahweh with their money shows that they really love Yahweh. Sometimes when I talk about the dietary laws, I tell people that if you set your mind to obey the dietary regulations in Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, you're proving to Yahweh that you really love Him, because food is such a big part of our everyday life. Every day. Most people don't miss a day to eat. We should be fasting. We should be. But most people in the world don't miss a day to eat. I remember I told a heathen one time I was fasting for one day, and he just thought, not eating for a whole 24 hours? You know, and Brother Arnold said one time he was on a 21-day fast, and he was at the doctor on the 20th day, and the doctor told him, "You're looking a little peckish, Arnold." He said, "Is there something wrong with you? Are you sick?" He said, "Well, I've been fasting." He said, "How long have you been fasting?" He said, "Well, I'm going 21 days, and today is day 20. He said, the doctor looked at him and said, "Are you trying to kill yourself, Mr. Bowen?" People in the world sometimes think it's crazy, but the scriptures are full of fasting. My point here is this. I don't want to get too far off on a rabbit trail. Food is something that's a big part of our everyday life. I was talking with Phil and Jessica last night. I love to eat. I do. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable. It's a pleasure Yahweh has given us to enjoy within the confines of His Torah, right? Okay? When you decide you're going to allow Yahweh to dictate the animals that you do eat and don't eat, it's really showing Yahweh you mean business, because you have to adjust or readjust your life to fit what Yahweh has said. It's the same thing with money. Money has corrupted many people throughout the history of mankind. It has made wicked people more wicked. It has made some righteous people wicked because they get a lust and a crave for it, and then all of a sudden it takes over their life. When you let go of that control and you say, Yahweh, I'm going to do with my finances what you require me to do, giving to the poor, giving to the widows, giving to the orphans, tithing. You're saying, I really serve you, Yahweh. I really love you. You're letting go of something that your flesh wants to control. You don't just say you love Yahweh. You show Yahweh that you love Him by honoring Him with something that many people are manipulated and corrupted by, the almighty dollar. The book of Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus, chapter 29, 9 through 13, I pulled it up out of the Good News Translation, says this: The Lord has commanded us to help the poor. Don't refuse them the help they need. It is better to lose your money by helping a relative or a friend than to lose it by letting it rust away under a rock somewhere. Use your wealth as the Most High has commanded. This will do you more good than keeping your money for yourself. Count among your treasures the fact that you give to the poor. It will save you from all kinds of trouble and will be a better defense against your enemies than the strongest shield or the stoutest spear. That's beautiful, isn't it? Sirach 29. It's a good memorization. That's to be a good Haggah, Brother Sandy. Good Haggah. Always remember to treat people how you want to be treated, and take extra care for those who are poor or most vulnerable in society. We talked about that with the widows and the orphans. They're the most vulnerable, or a poor person, a person that's lost use of their legs or what have you. Take extra care to watch out for them. Let me say, I've said this before, but when you give to the poor, we do that here in our assembly. I have a way that if you want to give to some orphans, I can help you out, and I can give you the avenue to give to some genuine orphans with a lady that has a ministry that I can talk to and converse with. And there's a lot of scams out there today, but this person I know personally. But you don't have to go through me. You don't have to go through a preacher. If somebody's poor that you know, you can just give it directly to them. Your money doesn't have to come through me. You just give it directly to the widow, the poor, the orphan, and it needs to be a normal practice in your life. You need to set some of your money that you earn aside for charity to people that are in need. Even in areas where you're allowed to make a profit in business, make sure that you don't go overboard with people. I tell my sons that work with me, and I've been privileged to be able to work all of my sons to some degree or another, but I've told them that there's only one question they need to ask when they do business with somebody else, and that is this: how would I want them to treat me if the situation was reversed? Everybody understands you have to make some money, you have to make a profit in life, but we all know there's a point where you can go overboard. I talked with a woman the other day. bless her heart. She was a little bit younger than me, and she lost her husband abruptly. She was a widow. She cried out there in the front yard over top of the septic tank while we were talking. And she didn't know I was a preacher. I didn't tell her. Didn't tell her. But she said that she had gotten scammed by another company, $5,000. She called me out there because somebody referred me to her. She had the exact same problem she had before she called that first company out there. I don't want to sound too mean, but I think there's a special place in hell for people that do folks like that. The woman had just lost her husband, and they scammed this woman out of thousands of dollars and didn't even fix her problem. Basically, she's going to have to pay that amount of money to actually fix the problem. And I wish so much that she'd have called us off firsthand and used that $5,000 to actually fix what needed to be fixed. My heart went out to her as she cried. She said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I didn't work. I was a stay-at-home mom. How would you want somebody to treat you if the situation was reversed? Always ask yourself that. My father-in-law told me, he said, you do a good job for a fair price, and you'll end up having more work, and people will call you back over and over and over again. He said, you end up making more money in the long run than the person that makes all their money quick on a scam because they'll never get used again. And I've modeled my dealings with people after what Brother Arnold told me that years ago. There's people that still call us back because Brother Arnold treated them so well. I'm so thankful I got to work with him for a while. I remember one time he took care, the woman told him he could just drive over her flower bed, and he said no, and he took that caterpillar and he just, you've seen people that's good on a backhoe, he just crawled over those flowers. She called back 20 years later, and Arnold had done retired, and she said, the reason I called you back is because your father-in-law took care to not mess my flowers up. That's how we ought to be. And you'll end up being rich because people will want to use you. The septic tank will back up and they'll say, I don't want nobody else to come out here because I can trust you. Or whatever have you, whatever business that you're in. Treat people how you want to be treated. That's the golden rule, isn't it? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's the second greatest commandment. It's like the first. Love the Creator, but love your neighbor as you love yourself. Let's make sure we look out for the poor in our community, especially here. I try to focus my efforts on our community here, or those that consider themselves part of our community but live far away on Facebook or call in by phone. Sometimes we have a surplus where we can help people that we don't know in other Torah communities. But always make sure that you give some of your money to somebody that is in need. Do you love Yahweh? Hallelujah. Let's sing our song, and then Brother TJ will do testimonies. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall think on it day and night. Be careful to do what Yah tells you to do, so that you will have good success. Don't turn to the right, don't turn to the left, but stay on the narrow path. Be careful to do what Yah tells you to do, so that you will have good success.